Okay, hello, welcome everyone. My name is Barbara Martinez. I'm the Open Innovation Director at Conservation X Labs. Welcome to our webinar on the Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge. The way that the webinar works is that I'm in this panelist room along with a couple of my colleagues from Conservation X Labs. And then as you join the webinar, you're added as an attendee. So if you, first of all, I apologize for background noise. Because we are operating out of our office here. If you have a question as we are going along, there are a couple of options for you. You can digitally raise your hand, and then I can, I think the easiest way is actually if you type in your question in the QA box or the chat box. If you digitally raise your hand, it's possible to turn microphones on and off of attendees, but we might avoid that as sometimes the quality of the audio from attendees is not great. But I encourage you to ask questions as we're going along. I do have a few slides that I want to go through, and I hope to allow enough time for questions from all of you in the end. We're also recording this webinar. We'll release this video recording soon after the presentation if you want to share it with your colleagues as well. So with that, I will get started with the brief presentation. Also, when we share the recording, these slides will be a part of it too. So I don't need to separately send out a slide deck, but this will be part of that recording. So really the goal here is to, a couple of goals is really to talk to you about how to apply to the Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge, make the process as clear as possible for applicants, and answer any outstanding questions about the application process that you might have before submitting your application. And this is an outline of the presentation here, a bit of the challenge overview, the application process, the review process, and I'll get into more detail on that because there's the peer feedback stage, and then there's the external review process. And so I hope to clarify any questions that you might have about that. We'll also point you towards where we've been keeping track of frequently asked questions on the website. Your questions may have already been answered on the website, and just show you where to go to find those. So the Artisanal Mining Grand Challenge, we have divided this competition into 3 sub-challenges. So what that means is that we're looking for solutions, innovations that are going to address artisanal and small-scale mining issues. These solutions can be applied, developed, created anywhere in the world, and towards any commodity resource that is mined through an artisanal or small-scale mining through that sector. So the 3 sub-challenge categories are prevent, remediate, restore is the first one. So this is looking for innovations that can address the prevention of contamination, water contamination, biodiversity, loss to human health. Sometimes we refer to this as environmental health as well. How can you prevent that type of harm? How can you remediate that harm? How can you restore that harm? And we're really looking for innovative processes, technologies, something that you've seen work. Perhaps it's on a small scale, and this competition gives you the opportunity to go to the next level with your current innovation, help scale it up. The second category here is called reform the supply chain. So this, whereas the first sub-challenge is really looking at those innovations that are going to be applied perhaps at the site where resources are extracted. Reforming the supply chain is a sub-challenge where we recognize that these issues could be addressed at any point along the supply chains of these materials that have an ASM sector. So some of these issues here regard traceability, transparency, and even just understanding who all of the actors are along those supply chains as you dive deep into these different commodities. Understanding all those actors could also help you understand where are those opportunities for innovation. The third category here is the global data challenge. This sub-challenge seeks solutions that not only measure the social and environmental impacts of ASM, it's not only collecting necessary data that's lacking, but what are you going to do with that data so that there is an impact, so that there is a positive outcome on the lives of the people who are engaged in ASM, on the impacts of ASM on the ground. So we're looking for ways to collect that data, ways to interpret that data, ways to apply that data. And actually the next webinar that we'll have for the challenge will be on the sub-challenge, specifically on the data challenge, and that one is next week. Finally, the Microsoft AI for Earth Award is not a separate sub-challenge, but it's a prize that will be awarded. It could be, your solution might be in any of the 3 sub-challenges, and it'll be an award for an innovation, a team that is utilizing artificial intelligence or machine learning in the development, in the application, implementation of their innovation. You'll notice in the application there are a couple of additional questions if you are eligible for the AI for Earth Award, and you'll only need to answer those if you are pursuing this award. So there's a slightly different scoring system depending on if you're applying to the AI for Earth Award versus not. So again, I already mentioned this, but your innovation could be applied or developed anywhere in the world. Also, the materials, it's agnostic. If your solution is in the space of artisanal scale gold mining or cobalt or rare earths, your innovation is most likely eligible under this competition. So this slide is, these are the evaluation criteria. Your applications, the questions that were created in the application and the way that the judges will review the application really fall into these 4 areas. The first one is impact. Second one is design of the innovation. Then we have adoption and scalability. And then the 4th area is business and financial viability. So in the handbook, the challenge handbook, we give a little more detail about each of these criteria. And you'll notice in the application, the questions align with these criterion too. So but a little more detail on each of these. So the first one on impact. What we're asking the external judges and reviewers to pay attention to is, and for you to pay attention to also in the creation, in the development of your application, is that your innovations really should have a positive environmental and human health or human health impact. So under impact, we're interested in biodiversity conservation. We're interested in water resources, conservation of water resources. So that's water quantity, quality, and the hydrology. We're looking for innovations that will improve human health and human security. The types of questions that we're asking, we're really asking for some evidence here. Give us some, some proof, as much proof as you have, that your innovation will have a positive impact. This is going to be interpreted differently based on your innovation. Maybe you already have that data. Please tell us about that. If you don't have the data, tell us how you might get that information. What are those positive outcomes that you hope to achieve through implementing your innovation? The second category here is design of innovation. So now this category really, it touches on a few things. Is your technology feasible? Can you demonstrate that that you have put some really that you've put some thought into the design of the innovation regarding who is going to use it, why are they going to use it, and in what context? So this kind of gets into a few of these questions and categories really get into design thinking, designing for your audience, for the context, for the users. Because you can have a really great idea and innovation, but if you don't have a consumer or customer or user base, it's not going to scale. It's not going to get uptake. It's not going to get adopted by the users, and you won't see the intended impact that you really want to have. So in innovation design, that's the category where we're really looking for you to provide us with evidence, with your thoughts on how will people you know, like why are people going to use this? Why is it novel? Why does it actually address the problem that you've stated that you are seeking to solve? And that also, you'll notice there's a bit of overlap between that category and the adoption and scalability category. So again, we're really looking for those innovations that have the users and customers in mind, where you're really creating to address, you're really creating something that's going to address a stated problem. You know, we talk about the necessity for these innovations to scale so that there's an impact. So, you know, some of these questions that we have in the application really try to get you to you know, talk to us about, or not, I say us, the judges, the reviewers. Tell us about how this has been designed with your users or customers in mind, and how is it that you might get to mass adoption of innovation? And by mass adoption, we mean people will implement and use so that there is the impact. The last category here is the business and financial viability. So, it's all background noise here. So business and financial viability. In order for these innovations and solutions to thrive and to have their intended impact, someone needs to pay for them. That's just a reality. So these questions are really getting at what's the business model behind the innovation? How will they stay financially viable? We're not looking for people to have the same business model. We're not advocating for any one certain type of business model. We've had questions about should an innovator apply for intellectual property protection before entering into the competition? Should they provide something that's open source? You know, and those are questions for, we're not going to give you an answer, but those types of decisions are up to you as an applicant to decide what makes the best sense for your innovation, the market that you're targeting, and you know what is the financially viable option for your particular innovation. Okay. I'm reading through some of the questions right now, and okay, so these questions that I have so far are on specific questions in the application, and I'll get to those in a few slides. So just quickly, the timeline for the application is here. Obviously, the application period is open. It closes March 1st. That means that you have to have your application submitted through the SurveyMonkey Apply platform by the end of that day. I think it's 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. That's Eastern, United States, New York, DC time zone. Soon after that application period, we're going to have the peer feedback and revision period, which I will get to. Then there's an external review stage, and that's where your applications go to the external judges and reviewers who are going to score and evaluate your applications and determine who's going to become a finalist in this competition. July, August is when we'll schedule pitches and interviews for those finalists. And then by September, we will have the prize winners determined and announced in a closing event. So the first part of the process after you submit your application is the peer feedback stage. So the objectives are, okay, the next few slides, I'm going to go through these points here. So what are the objectives of peer feedback? What is the revision group versus non-revision group? How do you provide feedback? And then whether you utilize this feedback or not. So the objectives are really, we're instituting this process because we want to give people an opportunity to hear from some of their peers. It's a competition, but we're also trying to build a larger community of practice. We're trying to facilitate some of these connections and awareness of other groups and individuals working in this space, all working towards solving aspects of the various issues and problems associated with ASM. We hope that this could lead to collaborations and perhaps lead to other opportunities between competitors. And we are trying to incentivize this as well. There will be incentives if you give high quality positive feedback. So we go into some detail about this in the Innovator's Handbook, but there are basically two groups, and everyone's going to be randomly assigned to one group. If your application is eligible, you will have the chance to decide if you want to change groups here. Okay, so the revision group means that your application will be opened up to peers, not all of the peers and not all of the competitors, but a small set of peers will have the chance to read your application, provide you with high quality feedback, and then you will have a chance about a week to make revisions to your application. If you are in the non-revision group, no other competitors are going to read your application. Your application will remain closed. You will not receive peer feedback. You will not have a chance to make revisions to your application. However, everyone who submits an application, you are all going to be in a pool of peer reviewers. So you might have your application closed, but we ask you to read, it's going to be somewhere from 3 to 5 other applications and provide them with high quality, constructive feedback on their ideas and on their application. This feedback is going to be short. You'll have a maximum of 350 words per application that you read. We're not asking for extensive reviews. You're not going to be scoring or evaluating those applications. This is really a chance to understand what your peers are doing and to provide them with some thoughtful remarks. You will also have a feedback score. you receive feedback, you're going to give that a score. Is it high quality? Is it low quality? That score is ultimately going to affect your final score in the competition. So I'm seeing that there are some questions or comments. Chad, Amy, is there anything that?
Nothing to address right now.
We just posted the Innovators Handbook in the chat. So if anyone wants to look at it while we're talking about it, the Innovators Handbook, the links are in the chat.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so how to provide that peer feedback. We're going to facilitate this through the same application platform, the SurveyMonkey Apply platform. We're going to ask you to be concise in your feedback, be constructive, think long term. This isn't going to be anonymous. So you will see the name of the lead author on the application to which you're reading and supplying feedback, and they will see your name too when you provide that feedback. What will not, I'll get into this too when we get to the actual application part, but there's a whole demographic section in the application that will not be shared with your peers. It's just going to be the name of the lead author and the essay questions, not the demographic information. I just want to make sure that's really clear, that those personal details about you and your team members is not going to be shared with the peers, and it's also not going to be shared with the external reviewers. That is just held within our organization for our purposes. So Amy and Chad here are in the room with me, and they are paying attention to the chat function, to the chat and the QA right now. And they're either typing responses or they will signal me if I should address a question out loud. Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay. So a bit about the timeline here. Again, March 1st is the deadline for the application, and then you're going to be, basically like once you submit the application, just pay attention to your email, because we're going to be sending you notifications about assignments to this revision or non-revision group. Also about eligibility within the competition too, and that's in the next couple of slides, I'll go through that. Basically, you'll have 2 weeks to read your peers' applications, and then if you're in the revision group, you'll have a week to make any revisions based on whatever feedback you got. Okay, the application. So there are 3 main sections to the application.
Can we address one question about
Sure.
the peer review section?
Yes, there's a question about peer review. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is it considered better or worse to be in the revision group?
Okay, so we have a question asking if it's better or worse to be in the revision group. Okay, so let me try to go through the benefits of being in the revision group versus not being in the revision group. The benefits are that if you're in the revision group, 1, you will have time to make changes to your application after that deadline of March 1st. You'll get another chance. And you have the opportunity to hear back from some of your peers on, with suggestions, ideas about how you can improve your application. So maybe it's that they have suggestions for improving the way that you describe something or the way you address a question, or maybe it's suggestions like they know of a similar group innovation that could be useful to your application. So the benefits really are that you could get some really useful feedback from your peers who are also trying to innovate within this space. You might have the opportunity to meet colleagues, potential colleagues and collaborators through that process. And then third is that you get the chance to make revisions. If you are not in that revision group, you do not get to make revisions after you submit on March 1st. And we still ask everyone to read and provide feedback. Are there anything else that you guys want to add that I may have missed?
No.
Okay. So again, I'm going to say it's up to you. I don't think one is better or worse. If, we have had some questions come in, concerns about protecting IP or ideas. If you're not comfortable sharing your idea with the other competitors in the competition, then I would suggest that you don't enter the revision group, because then that means your application will only be reviewed by the external reviewers who are giving you the scores and who are considering who's going to win the prize money in the competition. Okay. All right, so the application. There are three main sections. There's the demographic information, and like I said, this information is not going to be provided to your peers. Here they're called peer reviewers, but the other applicants in the competition, they won't see this. It also won't be provided to reviewers or judges. Conservation X Labs, that's our organization, the ones administering this competition. We will use that demographic information. It really helps us understand who's applying, and really how can we improve our processes and our services and our programs going forward in open innovation. The technical application is the part that is going to be shared with the peer reviewers and then the external reviewers and judges. So these are all the essay questions that correspond to those criteria that I went over earlier. This is where you can attach supplementary materials. I think there was a question on this that I wanted to make sure I address all of those. Yeah, so this is a section that's going to be evaluated and scored and determine whether you're eligible for the prize money or not. So I'm looking through the QA box right now. So can you cross-reference the 2-page supplemental documents between the short answer sections? Yes. Yes, you can definitely cross-reference any of the supplemental information. Just make it really clear to the readers. And my advice here is that in preparing your application, it helps sometimes to put yourself in the shoes of a reviewer. So provide them with enough information to really understand your innovation. If you are referencing documents multiple times, that's fine. You can do that. I really want to encourage you to keep those supplemental documents to 2 pages per upload. If you submit more than 2 pages per upload, it is not likely that your judges or reviewers will read beyond 2 pages, because the guidance that we give them does not include that they need to read all of the supplemental materials. They just need to read as much as we've allowed, which is 2 pages per upload. We've had questions about what might go into those attachments. You can include citations, if you have diagrams or images or anything that's going to better explain a response to an essay question, you're going to better explain it visually. That's also where you can use the supplemental information. By no means should you only rely on information that you upload. You still need to put responses into the text fields for each essay question. And that's where you should really focus on the bulk of your information. Okay. And then the next question in here is on a specific question in section D. And if you don't mind, I'll get to that in a couple of slides. Okay, there's a question about after you specify an innovation title when you start the application, will there be an opportunity to change the name of the project before you submit the final application? I think that you can change the name once you start an application. Chad will check on that, but yeah, I think that that's not set in stone, because I think, yeah, that is one of the first questions you're asked is what is the title? I'm pretty sure that you can edit that before you submit the application. Okay. So then the third part of the application is the short video or image. And so one of the basic eligibility criterion is around the fact that your innovation needs to has to exist. There has to be something to it. There has to have been a previous demonstration, a pilot, a proof of concept beyond it has to be beyond a theoretical concept. These could be innovations that exist in a laboratory setting, and perhaps this competition is an opportunity to move from the laboratory to the actual environment where you're going to be implementing the innovation. So this part of the application is asking for visual proof of the solution. So we're asking for a short video. Does not need to be well produced video, very short, less than 2 minutes, or pictures, photographic evidence, something visual that we can see. And I believe there's also space in the application that if you need to provide documentation with the video or the images, there's room to also include an attachment. Like for example, if you have to provide a transcript to the video, that's allowed. Looks like Amy's gonna pose a question.
We have a quick question about the short video impact requirements. Does solution refer to the innovation?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. We tend to use solution interchangeably with innovation here. Yes, when we're talking about solution in the context of this competition, that is your innovation. That is the thing for which you are submitting your application about. Does that address the question? Okay. Thank you.
Renaming.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. And I was just playing around with SurveyMonkey a little bit. I know there's a question about renaming your application. That is possible. If you go to the sort of home page for your application, there is a series of 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. You click that, there's a drop-down menu that says rename, download, and delete. So you can simply click rename and rename the title of your application there. So hopefully that answers that question.
One more thing with the SurveyMonkey Apply platform. So, I mean, obviously that's not the platform that we have designed. It's SurveyMonkey manages it, but if there's anything as you're going through that system and it seems confusing or you're having any technical difficulties with the application platform, I think the symbol is a little eye in the corner. There's a help button. You can access help if it's anything that is specific to that platform. You're always welcome to reach out to us at the water@conservationxlabs.org email too. And if it is something that is a SurveyMonkey question, we can always send it on to them to get get the response. They might be more responsive if the question comes from us versus other users. We're not sure yet, but if you are having issues with the platform itself, please feel free to reach out to us and we can help you. Okay, so the basic eligibility criteria for your application. In these competitions, those of us here in the room are not judges. We're not going to determine who's going to win the prize money, but we do scan all of the applications to make sure that they pass some very basic eligibility criteria. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone here as well. So one, the application is complete. In the SurveyMonkey apply option, I think you actually are required to provide text in all of the text boxes. But that still doesn't mean that if you do that, the application is complete. So we're looking for a complete, you need to respond to all of the text boxes where it's required. Again, when we do the scan, we're not scanning for quality. We're just making sure that you meet these really basic eligibility criteria. So first, the application is complete. Second, the application is in response to the Grand Challenge. The Grand Challenge is on artisanal and small-scale mining. There are a number of possible solutions, innovations that address all of the various issues regarding ASM, and we fully recognize that. If you submit an application on a topic that is very much outside of the scope of ASM, you will not be eligible in this competition. The application needs to be in English. We do ask a question in the demographics section to identify what your I can't remember how it's phrased, but what your language is, and that's not that's so that we can understand if there's we like to give guidance to the external reviewers that they should really look for the idea, the quality of the idea, the innovation, and try not to get bogged down in the grammar. And this is especially important for when we have applicants where English isn't the first language. Then the final component here, which I touched on in talking about the video, is that the innovation is a physical, tangible, actual thing or process by the closing of the application deadline. The innovation does need to be more than an idea on paper, or a theoretical concept has to be beyond a theoretical concept. Just a note of caution here: if the development stage is unclear from the materials that you've provided in the application, it might be disqualified. So just make sure that you're very clear about in what stage is this innovation? How far have you gotten on this innovation? We also really encourage innovations from other sectors. So if, for example, you have something that's worked, say, in a sustainable agriculture context, or in, I don't know, a fisheries context, and you think that it has similar applications here in ASM, by all means, please provide us that information. It doesn't mean that you have to have tested or piloted your innovation in the ASM context yet, but how can this be adapted and applied to ASM? Is there a question?
There's a question that I think you just answered. So from anonymous attendee, we have a solution that works great for smallholder farmers. We're sure it applies to ASM mining communities. Are we eligible? Yes.
Yes. Yes, you are. Okay. Please type in a follow-up if you need me to clarify anymore. But yes, you definitely are applicable. Just as you go through the application, consider what do you need to do in order to adapt it to ASM? And I think that the questions really try to point the applicants towards answering that way. All right. So now I'm going to go through a few screenshots of the application itself. I'm not going to go through all of the questions. I do still have in the queue a couple of specific questions on, let's see, it's question B4 and C5 in section D. All right, I'll make sure I get to those. So first of all, if you haven't created your account yet in SurveyMonkey Apply and you haven't looked at the format, this is what it looks like. This is a screenshot within SurveyMonkey Apply. This particular question on the sub-challenges, I think we wanted to point this one out because we're noting that the sub-challenges, you don't just need to choose one, but you can select many. We know that some innovations might not just fit under one of these categories. If it fits within multiple, then please check the boxes, but you don't need to check all of them. Just check the ones that make the most sense. For us, it's more of a sorting. It helps us sort the applications. You're not evaluated on which box you check. The Microsoft AI for Earth box, though, will take you to those additional questions. So if you want to be eligible for that, if your innovation is eligible, you need to check that box in order to have access to those specific AI for Earth questions. What we wanted to do here in the application itself is try to be as transparent as we could regarding how the judges and reviewers are going to be reading your application. So the judging rubric here is in the application. You can see it. They're going to be providing you a numeric score on a scale of 0 to 5. So 0 means that your response did not meet the criteria. 5 means that it exceeds the criteria, and then we have the numbers in between. For each of those technical submission criteria, there's a number of points assigned to each area. They also impact, innovation design, adoption and scalability, business and financial viability, 20 points each per category. And then there's a feedback score, which would be an additional 5 points. The peer review, sorry, thank you, Chad. That is the peer review feedback score that others will give based on how well you provide them with useful content, useful feedback. So there's a total of 85 points. If you're eligible for the Microsoft AI for Earth Award, then there's an additional 10 points. So again, it's a different scale if you're eligible for that versus not. A few pointers here on this slide too. Again, put yourself in the position of the reviewer in providing concise, useful information. Try to avoid jargon. If you are using terms of art or jargony words, then take the time to define them. And even if it helps, you can use the supplemental attachments to define those terms too. So this is a screenshot of the impact section in the technical part of the application. There are 4 aspects of the impact criterion: biodiversity conservation, water quality, quantity and hydrology, human security, and then no inadvertent negative effects associated with your particular innovation. So in this section, there are 4 statements that you have to reply. So you have to reply to 4 questions, and there are 4 statements, 4 text boxes, and each of those text boxes you will get 5 points each. Sorry, you get up to 5 points per text box, a total of 20 points. Oof. All right. You're also allowed to submit a 2-page PDF or document file to substantiate any of the claims that you're made within this section. So here's a snapshot of the first two text boxes under the impact section. So the lettered statements, so here judge criteria A, the innovation will have a tangible net positive impact on biodiversity conservation, including at a species, community, and or ecosystem scale. So that's what the judges, that's basically their guidance and what they're reading for when they read what you put in the text box. And so applicants should, here's the question, here's that posed as a question. Describe how and to what extent the innovation will achieve impacts on biodiversity conservation. You have up to 300 words to justify your statement. Yeah. So that box there, you will get up to 5 points for your response. And the same thing with the next one with B2, up to 5 points. There's a question. Amy?
Yeah, we did get a question about water and hydrology specifically. Does the innovation have to relate to water improvements? Kind of relates to this question.
So water improvements. So we know that you can't solve everything with one innovation, right? So we know that the innovations aren't going to simultaneously improve water and hydrology, water quality, quantity, and human health and biodiversity loss. And we also, right, and we do have separate questions on biodiversity and water. This, you know, our goal of this competition is really to address water and biodiversity impacts. It's kind of and or. So I don't know if I'm answering the question because I'm not actually reading the question right now, but
it's just one of the impact criteria.
Yeah, it's right. I don't know if you guys heard Amy say that, but it's one of those impact criterion. So if your innovation is really focused on addressing biodiversity, then tell us that, and I would recommend that you make reference in the other section, the water one, that perhaps indirectly, because you have a positive impact on biodiversity, this is the indirect water effect, or but I think the answer maybe is that your innovation does not need to solve all of these. I mean, if it did, amazing, but but no, I hope that answers it. Are we getting? Is there a follow up on that?
No, she's good.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, we do have a question here on. It says we have no ASM expertise on the team, and we are talking to mining experts who advise us. Do they have to be on the team? No, they don't have to be on the team. You can you can add them as collaborators if they want to be a part of the competition, but you by no means have to. You can reference in your write-up that you are speaking to them. You can even include attachments of your interviews or like feedback that they've provided, but I would ask them if they want to be a part of the application process and invite them, but they don't have to. Okay, the next section, design of the innovation. So again, this is a little different from the impact one because not to confuse you as an applicant, but I recognize this might be a little confusing. The 4 judged criteria have multiple text boxes. So I will show you on the next slide. This first one here, okay, so A, the innovation has the potential to transform at least one aspect of the ASM industry. So you get a total of 5 points across both of those text boxes. So the judges aren't going to give you 5 points for one and 5 points for two, but it's a combination of those two boxes, which will determine your 5 points. Okay. Chad gave me the thumbs up for that.
That was great. There's a question that relates to this section, so maybe we should address this now from Rebecca. Questions B4 and C5 in section D.
Okay, so the question is, okay. Questions B4 and C5 in section D seem almost identical. Can you please explain the difference? Okay, so B4 is explain how innovation is different from how the innovation is different from other solutions that are out there and contrast elements of innovation that are unique to help solve the identified need or problem. And then explain how this innovation creatively solves need. Wait, are these copied? Creatively solves a need or problem. Contrast elements of innovation to existing solutions, or if relevant, elements of innovation that are used for a different tech application, i.e. not currently used in ASM, but another sector. I need to have a copy of the handbook. Do you want to address it?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
start. So I think what we're looking for here, Rebecca, is I think C5, we're really looking at actually related to a question that was answered earlier with the farming example. That's an example of an innovation that's being used in a parallel sector or an adjacent sector that's not necessarily directly related to ASM. So they're using an innovation that's currently being used in a different sector for ASM. So I think that's the uniqueness between these two questions. Whereas B4, we're just looking at the innovation sort of more generally. So how does that innovation address the problem that you've identified within ASM? So instead of just kind of paralleling an existing solution in a different sector, this question before is asking exactly how it addresses ASM. They're very similar. I understand the confusion there, but hopefully that helps answer your question. And if you need more explanation or would like more explanation, please send us an email.
All right, I wanted to look at the handbook on a different computer screen. If I pull it up on my computer screen, then we lose the presentation. So those two questions, the judged criteria too should also help you help inform the way that you respond to those questions. So I'm looking at page 30 of the Innovator's Handbook right now, where these two questions appear in the application. So for the first one, so for question B4, the judged criteria is that the innovation is sufficiently different from existing solutions that are currently deployed in the field. And so we're asking you to explain how this is different from other solutions. How is it going to uniquely solve the problem? This really gets at do you understand the competitive landscape of other innovations that are working to address this problem? So in that response, you might point out, if you're aware of them, you might point out there are these other approaches that you're aware of. These might be other companies or other projects if you're aware of them, explain how is yours unique and novel. Oh my. Okay, Amy just let me know that we only have 5 minutes left. All right, so the rest of the slides here are just snapshots of those different sections. This is adoption and scalability, and again, similar to the last section, some of the judged criteria have multiple statements for which you have to supply responses. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. I wanted to make sure that I got to this last screen of the frequently asked questions. As people send us email questions, we try to update them on the site. If you have lingering questions after this presentation, please do email them to water@conservationxlabs.org. We'll respond accordingly and add them to the FAQs. Are there any remaining questions that we have? So there was just the one question that came through asking for the difference between two similarly phrased questions. We're more than happy to respond to those as you're going through the questions and you have similar ones. Again, email them. I didn't necessarily want to spend the entire hour going question by question, although I realize that could also be useful to you as applicants. Send us, my recommendation is to send us a note by email and we can clarify, and then we'll publish those to the frequently asked questions.
One question. The application, there's a question.
Yes, so the question is that the application is fully available offline. Yes, it's all in the handbook. So you can create a SurveyMonkey Apply account and see the application, but you have to fill in dummy information in order to advance to all the sections. So we tried to make it easy for you by publishing all of the questions in the handbook itself. All right, I got the thumbs up emoji for that. Thank you. All right, do we have a minute if there are any more questions. Okay. All right, again, please send us your questions to water@conservationxlabs.org. We really look forward to hearing from all of you through your application. We're very excited about this competition. Share it with your peers if they're also interested in applying. And we hope to hear from you soon. Oh, and most people do wait until the last minute to submit, but try not to. Get started early, because you probably, as you read through the questions and go through the process, we want to make sure that we can address your questions in a timely manner. So as soon as you get those questions, send them in. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, and best of luck.